Hey, friend. Welcome to the Human Design Diaries, a soul aligned sisters podcast. Here we will delve into the fascinating world of human design. In this series, we'll cover the basics, dive deep into the gates and channels, and share plenty of laughs and magic. Join us as we explore how human design can guide you to live a more soul aligned life. Get ready for insightful conversations full of practical tips and insights to help you on your journey. Let's explore. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been on a bit of a hiatus from recording. We took some time to focus on our business. We've got some fun collaborations going, and we kind of missed sitting down and just talking human design. So here we are on December 19th. We are going to, talk about something sort of interesting, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Jill, so you can sort of lead, what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah. Well, I think this was your idea. I think you mentioned it to me maybe like a month or two ago, and I thought it was a good idea. And so here we are doing it. And what you had said was that maybe it would be fun to read our mom's chart. So for those in the audience who don't know, Becky and I lost our mom to breast cancer when I was 4 and she was 6. And I actually didn't like pull up mom's chart for I feel like I just recently did it, like in the last 6 months. It never occurred to me to look at it. And the reason why we're doing this today is because tomorrow is her birthday, December 20th, right? December 20th, 1952. Is that correct? To have that right?
That's right.
Okay. So the thing that's going to be cool about this is not only like, for us to share a little bit about her chart and like sort of what's, unique about her chart, but for us to try to make connections back to what we know about her life, which was it was a short life. And we were little. So a lot of it will, I think, be through storytelling, and you being our family historian, hopefully you have cataloged some of this stuff and you can validate it. But the other thing that I think will be interesting about this is that we actually don't know her birth time and we don't have access to her birth time. And so this is something that, in the state of Ohio, the state started putting birth times on birth certificates sometime in the 1960s. I've seen like maybe it's the late 60s, birth time will be on the birth certificate. And then before that, it's not on there. So you can, go to, like, if you have your birth certificate and it's not on there, or you don't have your birth certificate, you can go to, at least in Ohio, it's the Department of Health, and ask them for that information. And people who I've done readings for have done that. They've gone through that process of getting the actual birth certificate from the Department of Health that has the time of birth on it. Unfortunately, I don't think we have any way to do that. And even if we did, I don't know that it would have her time on it. So in some instances, people do not have access to birth time. And what we would say is, when it comes to getting the most accurate chart, you do need your exact date of birth, the time of birth, and the location where you were born, meaning city, state, country. And that's because the chart is based off of where the planets were at the exact moment that you were born. So when you don't know the exact time, then, over the course of a day, the chart can change. And so I thought it would be fun for us to look at how do I go about figuring out what chart to use when someone doesn't know their birth time? So are you ready to get into it? Should we just
Yep.
go right there? Okay.
I'm ready. I'm
All
ready.
right. Okay, cool. I'm gonna share my screen so I can show you and others how I kind of look at a chart where I don't have the exact time of birth. So let me just share. I use a software called Genetic Matrix, And the thing that's really cool about this is sometime in the last couple of years they have introduced I don't know, it's like a drop down that has a range of times. Before that, I was running it multiple times to see where and comparing charts to see where the changes are. So right now I can go and look for it. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's under, yep, the range, the birth time range. So in this view of the software that I use, Genetic Matrix, I can see here, what the chart looked like every 3 hours for December 20th, 1952, starting at midnight and going until 11 p.m. And so, the first thing I look at is, okay, where are there like major changes in terms of type or profile? That's the first place I look. So we can see here, if I look at this chart, that for the majority of the day, starting at like 3 a.m. until at least into the evening, sometime between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., there was some kind of a change, but it stayed the same. So a 1-3 emotional projector is what the chart is saying for the bulk of December 20th, 1952. So in that case, I would maybe come back to the person and I would say, well, what do you know about when you were born? What's the story around the time that you were born? Some people will know something like, oh, well, it happened. My dad had just gotten to work and then he had to leave and go to the hospital. Or I know it was sometime after, my brother and sister got home from school. I know that they were home, in the afternoon. So I know it was sometime after, 3 p.m. So people will sometimes know a little bit about that. Unfortunately, we don't know any of that. So the best thing that we can do is say, well, let's assume that it's going to be, one of these hours in the bulk of the day. So we can go with, let's see, earlier in the day. So we'll stick with one of these charts here. And I actually don't know which one I chose for her. So I'm going to pull it up. I'll go with like 9 a.m. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Let me pull that up. Okay, so here we have her quantum human design chart at 9, as of the birth time of 9 a.m. on December 20th, 1952. This makes her an orchestrator or a projector as the type. Her authority would have been emotional authority. Her profile is a 1-3 resource explorer, and her incarnation cross is the vessel of love. One
Of
thing to
course it
note,
is.
I know, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
One thing to note about the shifts in the chart or whatever. So even though for the bulk of the day she's a 1-3 orchestrator, depending on the time of day, some of the transits will move. So for example, the moon here is in gate 13, which is right here. But as you go through the day, the moon moves. And so that's one of the small changes that you might have if you don't know your exact birth time. But for the most part, you can get a lot out of the chart anyway. And I would say too, for people who don't have their exact chart or don't have access maybe even to their birth date, like their actual birth date, maybe they were adopted or that information's been lost for some reason, then you can kind of do your best to get the chart that feels the most correct for you. And we can ask some questions to kind of get you there to kind of narrow it down. And then instead of saying, which I think is really important for anybody, but instead of saying, like, this is what is true for me, you use it as more of a reflection tool. Does this feel true for me? Or how do I understand this aspect of it? Not that it's necessarily who you are, but a place of inquiry for you. So that's a way that you can use human design without knowing your exact birth information. So let me ask you, Becky, I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's surprising that she's an orchestrator or projector type, or like what you know about her and her personality and her life? What do you think about that?
Um, I would say it is kind of surprising, but also not. Considering that our dad is also an orchestrator, projector, you know, that sort of like tracks, like,
Hmm.
like attracts like. Um, but I guess I could see it because, I think mom was kind of a hustler. Like she was very multi-talented. And she dabbled in all kinds of things, but I think like for her, most of like how she made her money, and how she like her career, um, she really worked for herself. So she did hair, but she didn't, as far as I know, she didn't really like work in a salon. She sort of had her own hustle. Like, she would take us along, or at least I remember going along with her to, she did hair at like an old, like I don't know, a retirement village or whatever.
Hmm.
Like I remember going to the old lady's apartments and just sitting there and watching her do people's hair. I know at one point she did bookkeeping. She also made clothing. Like she was kind of dibbling and dabbling in a lot of different things, but I think it was all sort of in like the vein of like creativity, but also like making her own way.
Hmm.
So yeah, I guess I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so orchestrators as a type, orchestrators or projectors, are sort of like born wise. Many of them, they sort of like come in with sort of depth of understanding that maybe is like, how'd you get so wise at such a young age? And what you're talking about as far as like the varied interests, I see with a lot of orchestrators or projectors that they have a thirst for knowledge, that they want to learn new things, that they're always studying something different, something new. And it's not so much, I think kind of like a manifestor or initiator trait is to sort of like bounce around and maybe do some different things. And that may be true for orchestrators as well, but orchestrators, it's more driven by like the thirst for knowledge, for wanting to know how to do things, for finding interest in different things and really wanting to learn about those things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like it's interesting that, she in such a short period of time had like such a varied, like really varied experience, right? Like how do you like learn how to do bookkeeping and do hair and also work at a restaurant and also, right, et cetera, make clothing, right? Like that takes, I think,
Ceramics.
yeah, it takes like a certain ability to kind of learn new things and be interested in learning things that are different. Um,
Hmm.
the other thing about orchestrators that I think I can kind of see in just some stories about her is, sometimes orchestrators can get a bad rap. Um, Orchestrators are here to guide and lead, but they're not here to guide and lead everyone. And so sometimes in their desire to serve, and their desire to help, in their desire to share what they know, which is a lot, they know a lot of things about a lot of different things, um, it can kind of turn people off. And I know that she was not for everyone. Like, I have a sense, I mean, I don't know that anybody has actually said that, but I have a sense that, like, her personality was something that was different. She kind of had a big personality. She was a little bit fiery. She was kind of like sure of herself and knew who she was. And I can imagine that not everybody appreciated that about her. And I can imagine that she probably told people what she was thinking, even when she was not invited to do so. And that maybe made some people uncomfortable, which is a character. I mean, that's kind of like a general characteristic, but it's really true for orchestrators. And it feels really confusing for orchestrators when they get a reaction that they're not expecting, when really they're just trying to help. or, and I don't know, my view of her is like not so much it was trying to help, but it was more like, I know what this is supposed to be, and I'm going to tell you what I think, kind of thing. Is that what's your impression of that? Is that what you, from the stories you've heard about her, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, she was a Sagittarius, so for sure she had like that zest for life, fiery sort of personality. She died very young, but there were people she was estranged from in her family when she died. Um, because they didn't agree with her. Well, I mean, I'll just say it, like, because these people will never see this, but like, she was basically disowned for like wanting to. Our dad was Catholic, she was Lutheran, and our dad had a priest that he was a younger priest that he was good friends with, and our mom, when she was dealing with cancer, really, as grandma used to say, her mom used to say, she was embracing the Catholic faith. But I think, and for her, she was taking the sacraments and she was sending us to Catholic school, and that caused a big uh, rip in her already kind of, I think, based on stories I've heard, fragile relationship with her born again Christian older brothers. So, they were very anti Catholic. So, is what it is. But yeah, and she died without like resolving that, you know. But she stood in her truth. That was what she felt in her soul that she was exploring, and that's what brought her peace in her last days. Um, but yeah, like she was also a redhead, and
Hmm.
and we were both redheads when we were younger. I'm still sort of a redhead. Um,
Not me. On my way to white, thank you. I'm
um,
past my redhead days.
that's a total side um, thought about being a redhead. But dad would always say, we're feisty and fiery like her, and they would, like our family would say it was that redheaded gene. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it was way more than that. So yeah.
Hmm. And she has a defined identity center here in the middle, in yellow. And part of what the defined identity center offers people is a sense of self. So the main difference that I see, and when I talk to people and then my own experience, is when your identity center is defined or colored in, there's this like a decent sense of self. It's not true for everyone. Some people are like, I have no sense of who I am, even though my identity center is defined. But for the most part, it's kind of like what you see is what you get. I know who I am. I kind of walk through the world like a little bit more sure of myself. Whereas with a open identity center or an undefined one where it's white, there's this kind of sense of like I morph and change depending on who I'm with. Like and I think that quality sometimes can make people feel like they don't know who they truly are. Like, am I really this person or am I somebody different? And that can lead to feeling like you're always looking to belong. Like you're always searching to feel loved and accepted, because there's this, you just can't quite feel the energy of who you really are. What I would say to people and what I'm working through kind of on my own is that your ability to morph and change is actually who you are. You are all of those things. You are every aspect of who you show up to be. And as far as belonging goes, your ability to connect with people where they're at by shifting and changing yourself ever so slightly to be able to facilitate a connection means that you're the one who creates belonging. You're not seeking belonging. You might feel like that, but actually, you create belonging when you are able to kind of tailor how you talk to somebody, or the things you talk about, or what you wear, or how you know how you kind of show up in the world, to match or to more closely meet up with who you are connecting to. So the idea that she has a defined identity center feels really true. It
Yeah.
feels like, you know, she was someone who really knew who she was, and she didn't care what anybody thought.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the sense that I get, and she carried herself that way. It wasn't even just her personality, but like how she walked, how she took up space, like how she you know, strutted through the bowling alley. Dad tells that story, right? Of her, like the first time you met her, like just, here I am walking through the bowling alley. They met at the bowling alley. um yeah, so, and then I think too, like what's interesting about her identity center, which makes this special, is that because she has definition in all of these gates here, and they're in her incarnation cross. The 10 is the conscious sun, 15 is the conscious earth, 46 is the unconscious sun, and 25 is the unconscious earth. That gives her the incarnation cross of the vessel of love. So this is an interesting one for me because I am attracting these people. I am attracting the vessel of love. You know, there's like 192 different incarnation crosses, right? There's a ton of them. And the idea that I would see repeatedly people who have the incarnation cross of the vessel of love over the last, let's say, 6 months or a year, um, means something for me. And then of course, like I knew that that pattern was happening, and then I go and I pull her chart for the first time, and I'm like, of course she's a vessel of love. Like of course she is. Also, Tim, my husband, is a vessel of love. That's his incarnation cross. So I haven't figured out what that's about. But you know, one of the things I think about, like the vessel of love can be, different people experience it differently. um it really is, I think, if you kind of like pool all of the knowledge and all of the interpretation of the vessel of love from the experts who've looked at it, for anybody who, you know, maybe they synthesize the energies themselves and like try to understand what it might look like, it really comes down to love being sort of a directional, gravitational, guiding force in somebody's life. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a lovey-dovey kind of love, like, because not everybody experiences that way. For some people, they're more, you know, because of their own experiences, they're more closed off to love in that way, in the sort of emotional way that we think of love. But love is more than just love within relationships. I mean, I have a belief system that says that love is sort of the default state of the universe, that
Mm.
this is really what we are made of. And so if you think of it that way, then you can see that love is a driving force. How we operate in our lives, that in a way that like drives us towards more compassion, you know, more collaboration, more harmony, things like that. It can also kind of function for people like they say something to you and they don't give it a second thought, but it's like changed your life. It's like it has moved you into a completely new direction. It has changed something for you. Even without them realizing how important that was. That happens. And it doesn't make sense to people with the vessel of love. They're like, what are you talking about? I don't get it. But for the person who received the insight, it moves them. Like it
Yeah.
really changes their path. So um yeah, there's something about this, and I don't know what it is. Do you have any ideas?
I mean, I don't, but I feel that it also makes a ton of sense, especially when I look at like your spiritual journey, and really like digging into the heart space and exploring the idea of love and what that energy is. Um, you know, I also like think of it like I think she was somebody who gave tough love to people sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about it in terms of that. And then I go to the phrase that replays in my head often, which is, what would love want me to do in this
Mm-hmm.
situation? When I'm in like a difficult decision making, or maybe someone has done something that has really upset me, I tend to hear this like pause in my spirit, and like this energy of, what would love how would love react to this
Mm-hmm.
situation. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's a very deep, and I find people who have this to be extremely wise beyond their years,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I've, dealt with, or like there's been people who are like much younger, like, you know, um, like people who are like in their 20s or whatever. We're tending to start attracting like younger, the Gen Zs or whatever. And you meet these kids, and you're like, we're like right here,
Mm-hmm.
like you are wise beyond your years. So I think that that tracks, like, from what you're saying about her chart, generally, like it tracks that she would be somebody who had an incarnation of, the vessel of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish I could know more about her and know more about like how some of this might have played out for her, but unfortunately for you and I, like because it was so tragic that she died at such a young age with young kids, um it was not something that was easy for people to talk about even to this day. And the number
Yes.
of people who we can talk about it with are it's very small. It's a very small number, you know.
Yes.
But you bring it up and like someone's in tears. It's like
Yes.
even
Yes.
still, what is
She
it,
she
41 years later?
Yeah, she deeply impacted
Yes.
people's experience. And sometimes, like, I don't want to cry. I think she was one of those people that was brought in to be big, like big love, big, big personality, big life, and to exit early in service to all of the people who knew her. Because I think it really, for some people, I mean, it absolutely shaped who we are. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that it really was a defining moment in multiple people's lives, like
Yeah.
multiple. So yes, it is. We don't have very many people that will talk about her with us,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because I think it's still very raw for people 40 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me about how we can use her chart to sort of shed some light on some of the fun channels that she has, or like tell me about things that would clue you into some of like the really unique or, interesting channels or placements that she has that, like, you know might shed something, give us a new
Mm-hmm.
perspective that we don't necessarily have just from the stories that have been shared with us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I can talk about. Let's look at our chart again. So the first thing that really jumps out to me is this 1949. And this was North Node placement. So this is where she was going to be really digging in on the theme in the latter half of her life. But she has the 19 twice at least. The 19 in particular is extremely sensitive energy. It's really, and it's sensitive. It's, it comes off the root, but it's connected to the emotional solar plexus. So this energy is emotional in nature, but the sensitivity is also like tactile sensitivity, being sensitive to tags on clothing, being, having like skin sensitivities, or being like really sensitive about like having a sensitive palate, like about what you will eat, what tastes good to you, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's something that she experienced or not, but that's something that my son has. And um, our charts are inherited from our grandparents. So I wonder, I can't say, right? I mean, he's not an orchestrator, and I haven't looked at anybody, all the other grandparents, I haven't looked at their charts, but that's something that I wonder, like, did she experience that when she was a kid? Like, that she's like, wants to like get the tags out, or doesn't like how the clothes fit, or like, when she was making clothes, was she like really into how they felt or what the material was, or how did that maybe play out for her? But yeah, that sensitivity would have been there. Um, the other thing, I don't know how fun this is, but the other thing that's jumping out to me is she has this 1333 channel right here. Um, this is really I think this is like really good friend energy, meaning that it's really about taking in the stories of others, listening, kind of like, sometimes people with the 13 will be inundated by the stories of strangers. Like they randomly like meet somebody in the Costco line, and the person then proceeds to tell them all the drama that they're going through. So it's the gate of the listener. It really allows like it's an open ear, essentially, energetically, and people will then share stuff. And the 33 is a really nice, like, it's a good like sort of completion energy for that storytelling, in the sense that like the person who receives the stories, in this case she would have received stories from people, and then she would sort of integrate those stories and learn, like, how do you know which stories to share, how do you know which ones to let go of, how do you know which ones need to be buried, deep deep deep. So like I wonder whether there might have been like a period of time when she was younger where I'm just going to say, like, maybe there was a little gossip kind of nature to her personality, like a little bit of like hearing the story and sharing the story and that sort of thing. Not in like a malicious way necessarily, but just in the experience of learning about what gets told and what gets kept inside when you're somebody who's receiving all of the stories. So I don't know. What do you think? Was she a gossip, do you think?
A little.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a fire sign, you kind of, in my experience, you kind of enjoy that a little bit. Not in, like you said, not in a malicious way, but you like
Right.
good, juicy stories.
Oh,
And I
yeah. Like listening to what
imagine,
I heard. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I imagine as a hairstylist,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was like one of the things that, like, not just her creative energy in that space, but also the ability to like talk to multiple people a day and like hear their stories. And like, as we've gotten older and you've gone to different hairstylists, you start to notice like there's always like a similar sort of like talkative, like storytelling type of trait that a lot of people who do hair have, like, just
Mm-hmm.
naturally. It just comes naturally to them. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, I think it would have been fun to see how that evolved for her over the course of her life. Because in its highest expression, the telling of other people's stories is really meant to serve. It's meant to help people understand there are other possibilities, to understand what other people go through, to understand um, how things can be shifted or changed or whatever. And so in the space of like receiving something from somebody, and then being able to kind of pull out wisdom from somebody else's story of somebody who's gone through something similar or whatever, like that's the highest expression of it. It's meant to serve, not to like gossip. But it can be, I feel like, it could be a little gossipy. That's all right though. Like, you're learning the energy, so who cares?
Yeah.
And then if you if you need to get corrected, you'll get corrected. Right? Someone will come
Right.
back to you, call you a gossip or whatever, but
Right.
some high school stuff. Yeah. I mean, I always love the 15. I love the 15 energy so much. It's like my favorite, and no surprise because it's the love of humanity is contained in gate 15. And gate 15 is the gate of extremes. So sometimes there can be um there's a lot of different ways to think about this energy. I like to think about it when I'm like sort of focused on people and humanity. It's the ability to like reach out to the margins, to really like find and connect with people on the edges of humanity, and through that connection kind of bring them into the fold and help evolve you know how we are and who we are as humans. It's also a very like magical energy, connected to the natural world, connected to plants and animals, that sort of thing, is there. And I love that because I think that it's a really interesting energy, and it reminds us that sometimes extreme things need to take place so that new things can be born, or there's space for something new, or there's changes available, to new routes to take to make change. So yeah, I love that. What here's jumping out at you, if anything?
I have that gate, don't
15.
I? Mm-hmm.
I think you do, yeah.
I do. It's also an intuitive gate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like magical, like, you know, connecting to plants and animals, could include like communication there, those gnomes and fairies and like things in the natural world. That's the connection there for gate 15.
Yeah. And we know she loved animals, and
Mm-hmm.
she would love this, I think. She was into
Mm-hmm.
astrology. Her dog, our dog, she named Sagittarius. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. She found him on the side of the road in a box.
Aw,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's cute.
Hmm.
Yeah, so a lot here. I mean, she has a lot of had a lot of definition in her centers. She wasn't super open head, open will center, which is both are very common, and then the open sacral. But otherwise, she had a lot of definition here. Defined throat, meaning like all of the definition really speaks to like kind of being a force in the world and like sharing your energy out to other people, really feeling solid in who you are, as opposed to there being a little bit more fluidity to the nature of your energy and kind of who you are and how you show up, which is the gift of our undefined centers. So like I think it really does mesh with the picture I have of her in my head, which is she was just like a force, and she was here to be who she was, even for a short period of time. Like she came here to be who she was, to share love with people, to explore things, to try things, right? And she did that. I think she did that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes. She, I think, lived multiple lives in her short time.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah, and I think honestly, I also feel like to an extent she's probably still living multiple lives. Because my sense when not that I don't try to connect with her often, but I think the reason that I don't is because it's almost like she's unavailable. She's like busy doing something else. Like if I really need her, like I know she will show up for me, and she does show up in a really powerful way. Like I don't have any kind of generally speaking, like I don't feel things physically. I don't like I will have like vibrations in my body. I feel like my intuition through my heart center, like so I feel in that sense. But as far as like psychic touch, or like where you can like mediumship or whatever, like where you can actually kind of like feel somebody's presence or sense that somebody is around you. That's not really, I don't experience that. But when I call to her, which is rare, I will get something from
Hmm.
her. For example, like, I was having a hard time with it, processing it a couple years ago. And I, asked her to come be close to me. And I felt like a shock on my cheek, like as if she was like touching my cheek. And so I feel like, for me, when I think about her and kind of where she's at now, I feel like she might be back. I feel like, or
Walking
she's
around.
doing, yeah, or she's doing like really important work or something, but she is not that she's not there for me when I need her, but like, my sense is that she's busy.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you like when you try to connect with her? What do you feel like?
Uh, she, I will say, I'm a person who likes to ask my people on the other side to send me like a sign, and I like to
Hmm.
get very specific. And with her, it's a frog, which
Mm,
is like super random. But the times that I've asked her to do that, it showed up within a day. And
yeah.
like, I don't live in a swamp.
Right.
So
You live
I
in a
live in the
subdivision.
suburbs, right? Like I never
Right.
see frogs, but like the two or three times I've asked her, to send me a sign, it showed up within a day. I what's interesting is that I think over the course of our lives, we have seen multiple mediums. We have seen psychics and mediums and Akashic records readers. And I think one of the interesting threads from all of those is that the energy that they were able to pick up on was like she was deeply like um, deeply wise, uh, ancient soul. And I think we've had more than one, I think at least two or three people have told us that she was becoming an ascended master,
Mm,
in the angelic realm, maybe. Um,
mm. I don't know how
and
any of that works.
yeah, I think it's connected to the angelic realm. I should probably look more because I definitely feel a connection to the angelic realms.
Same.
But
Hmm.
to have more than one person actually say that, though, that phrase
Right.
made me think, oh, okay. 'Cause she had to get in and get out, like, do it big time, but gonna have to leave early because I've got shit to do on the other side.
Right.
Because I don't know if you've looked around, but this world is a hot mess. That kind of vibe.
Right. Hmm.
Um, so yeah, like you know, I think I love this, and I hope that this gives other people an idea about how they can connect with their loved ones on the other side. Um, that even pulling up their like chart, even if you don't know the time, you can pull multiple times and sort of get like maybe a little glimpse into like what their life was like when they were here, and sort of like what were sort of the big themes that they were here. Because if you believe, in these things like astrology, human design, these things, like, then you see it in yourself, you see how these things show up in your daily life, then you can imagine that the same thing would have happened for your loved one. So yeah, I want to dig into it even more. Like, I want to know some of the other like random chart or random like gates that you found interesting, that might have just been like, this is just probably one of the energies that she experienced, or
Hmm.
did we get our psychicness from her?
Maybe. I mean, she does have gate 57. She has the 5710. So yeah, I mean, she would have had some, psychic ability, and it's repeated twice in her chart. Although the 57 is repeated twice, it's all veiled, so it's in the red. But yeah, I mean, she could have, that's something that she could have tapped into. I don't know whether that's something that she was into or not. Um,
I mean, she
but
was into astrology in the 70s and she was married to
yeah,
our dad, so I would assume she was
yeah, probably
open to it.
somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just I don't have any context for it. I don't know how that was. That might be something we should ask dad about, like whether how she was into that. And then gate 10 is this one's interesting. I'm like chuckling now that I have brought it to my awareness. Gate 10 is the gate of self-love. It's a really empowering kind of energy, but it also can be like a verbal gunslinger, is what Karen Curry Parker says. Like, that's the phrase that she uses. And I know, her and dad used to have some knockdown drag out fights, and she did not pull any punches in how she fought. And I think that, like, if we were to tell dad that this was an aspect of her chart, that she could, like, you go low, she can cut you off at the knees, kind of thing, verbally, he probably would laugh at that now, right? I don't think it was funny then, but so that, I feel like that's definitely an energy that we're aware of with her, the like spicy sort of, like, do not fuck with me, kind of, like, you do not want to go toe to toe with me kind of vibe. But the other side of that coin is the ability to really empower people and make people feel really good about themselves. And this energy is at strongest when you are demonstrating self-love by example. What you're willing to accept, or how you choose to live your life, it is a reflection of how much you love yourself. So that's like the sort of like shinier side of it, but the shadow side can be like, oh, you want to go there? Oh, we can go there. Yeah, we can go there. So um yeah, I mean, I think those are really cool aspects. The other one that and both the 10, and I was going to talk about the 25, both of those are sort of like aura busting energies. I mean, she doesn't have the full channel on either side of it, but both of those can make people feel uncomfortable at times. And it's really designed to help people realign themselves, especially that 25. 25 is universal love, but it's also thought of as sort of like the shaman. It's about sort of helping people realign themselves to something more akin to like unconditional and universal love, or like the God's love, or the love of source, or the universal love, however you want to phrase it, but that higher vibrational experience of like unconditional love. But it can be really uncomfortable for people, like
Mm.
if they're a little out of sorts, then coming into contact with somebody like her with these energies might make them a little bit like, this doesn't feel good. That would be normal. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Anything else that like stuck out to you, or you're like, I don't even know how this would show up for her?
yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I'll share, I mean, we could go through all of them, right? All of them meant something to her and showed up for her in some way. But I think the last thing I will talk about is gate 32. Let me share. So gate 32 is here, and it shows up 1, 2, three times. So again, this would be a really prominent energy for her with it being in her chart three times. And gate 32 is the gate of endurance. And so that I think that's really, that energy is really about putting one foot in front of the other, you know, um, remaining committed, continuing to like try to take steps forward, right? To bring something, you know, in some cases it's like to bring something into being, like to bring an idea into the world, or, you know, um like how do you make change, right? Like you take one step at a time and you build and build and build until the moment is right, and then you're ready. And I have to think that that played a role in her, not just in her life generally, but especially like in the time that she was sick, and her commitment to continue trying to get well, to, you know, keeping a positive outlook even when things were kind of bleak, you know, really trying to remain committed and endure the things that she was going through. And I think during her life, you know, she learned a lot about endurance and staying committed to something. And so I know that, you know, up until the end, like she was not giving up. Like she didn't want to give up on life. And so I feel like that's a really good example of that energy at play for her. Like she had the energy and she was familiar enough, and this was a prominent enough theme for her, that even when things were like, even when it was like at the end of her life, like she was still committed to continuing, to wanting to keep trying to get better and all of that. So I think that was a big lesson for her during her life. And I think she might have, you know, I don't know if you can master something in such a short period of time, but I feel like what I saw, I would say, hey, good job there. You did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You did that. Like she literally did not give up, not even once, right? Like she
Mm-mm.
just never gave up. So even at the end, you know, sometimes when people are at the end of life, like they make a choice and they say, I'm done doing this. That is not what she did.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think, um, I hope she enjoyed this.
I guarantee you she did. Guarantee you she did. Um,
Yeah.
I would like, you know what I would love to know though, like if we're gonna, leave on a fun note, um, what like our charts, how would our charts, like if you had looked at your own, and you can just do yours because I know you know your chart better than mine, but like do you see anywhere areas where, oh, we probably would have bumped heads here? Like um it just, you wonder, like, especially like when you're going through your teenage years, like you start to like really bump heads with your parents. And I just wonder, like, what would our relationship have been like? Like, what would some of the areas where we would have bumped heads at been?
I mean, I think for me, I imagine like I have the 3635, which connects um my emotional solar plexus to my throat. And so I'm really designed to like speak my emotions. I'm designed to like allow them to kind of come up. And I think the only reason why, well, not the only reason, but one of the big reasons why um that is more controlled for me is because when I was little, as a result of the trauma of losing my mother, um, I think I like bottled my emotions because that's what felt safer, you know, considering like what everybody was going through or whatever. So I learned how to like not speak them. I think if she had been here, I probably would have been like flexing that muscle early on. And I'm sure I can imagine that we would have had some verbal altercations growing up. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that because I think that the loss of her changed my like emotional experience
Yeah.
and how I shared my emotions for a really long time. But now, Theo, my son, I that door has been opened for me, and we will go at it, he and I, and because he has the same thing as I do. So when he gets
Oh,
upset, it comes out of his mouth, and I have let the lid off a little bit. So when I'm in it with him, like, we will be yelling, both of us. And then we apologize and we say we love each other and all that kind of stuff. And but this is how our energy works. And I think that probably would have been the same with her. There probably would have been some yelling, I'm guessing. What about you? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We both had the 32. Um,
Mm,
I
mm-hmm.
I have it once in my conscious son. Um, I don't know. I don't know what we would have been like
Mm-hmm.
as a duo. You know, I I think I was definitely a mama's girl. Um, she always had me with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she was dragging us, but mostly like I remember being dragged everywhere with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I even remember her getting pulled over. She was a fast driver. Anybody would tell you that. Like dad said she had a lead foot. And somehow she always talked herself out of getting tickets because, oh, by the way, she was actually really gorgeous, a gorgeous redhead. And I remember her getting pulled over and listening to her fast talk the cop out of giving us a ticket. And it was just funny. I just found it hilarious. I just sat back and watched. So I feel like I probably would have learned to really speak my truth like
Mm-hmm.
very early. And I think I did pick up on that. I think I do attribute, I guess now that I know this about her chart, like I think she actually did teach me how to like really be sure of who I was and speak, you know, I think just by watching her speaking my
Mm-hmm.
truth and sometimes having it be fiery.
Mm-hmm.
I probably, picked up on that even at a very young age. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know other than that, but I I imagine I mean, when I just look at like dad being a projector, we bumped heads big time when I
Mm-hmm.
was a teenager. So I
Mm-hmm.
imagine I would have had the same struggles with mom, probably just a different flavor of it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because I mean, she had a defined ajna, so she probably was like, had this ability to feel certain and to say like,
yes.
this is how it is. And you're like, I don't agree with that. It's right. And like,
Right.
how do you navigate that? But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess who knows,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Um, who knows? But I think the thing that's really lovely about doing this is that it does give us the chance to think about her life in a different way, which may or may not be true, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, we
Right.
don't have any idea what it was really like for her. But I think that that's true, kind of what you were saying about, looking at your loved one's charts. Like, even if they've passed, I think it gives you another perspective outside of just whatever your experience was with them. And in some cases, it might actually help explain why they were the way that they were, even if it wasn't what you preferred or what you needed from them. Right? Again and again, compassion just comes up for me with human design. I just really feel that it is a really powerful tool to cultivate compassion for each other,
Yeah.
to understand that, like, sometimes the way things play out and the way energies play out are harmful, are not, productive, destroy relationships. But there's also other things happening. There's other things at play. Like and sometimes when you look at the shadow sides of some of these things at play, you can see that like, oh, that must not have been easy.
Right. Right.
That may have been a real struggle for them to figure out how to change the way this shows up for them in their life. Um, and I don't know, I mean, then who knows what's possible if you can have a new perspective on somebody in a relationship that you have with somebody, then it gives you potential avenues to healing, whether it's your own healing, whether it's, forgiveness, whether it's healing the relationship, whatever it might be. um, Ways to talk about it differently, right? Ways to address some of the things that go on. Just a new way to understand old problems, basically.
Oof. Yeah. That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think I can add anything to that. I think that was, yeah, this was really great, Jill. I really enjoyed it. Uh, and I do think like people should think about doing something like this,
Yeah.
even if it's just, you don't have to pay somebody to do it, even if it's just
No.
on your own,
Yeah.
exploring that. And, if we believe that we are eternal beings, your loved ones are never truly gone. They're just on the other side. So while maybe the relationship was difficult while they were here on this plane, it doesn't mean that that's an end to the relationship. You can still, like, you know, meditate on, I talk to them, speak to them out loud, because I believe they're still around. They can hear us when we
Mhm.
speak their name. So, yeah,
I
this was great.
agree. Except for mom, who was clearly busy doing something else. I don't know.
She's trying to fix humanity. She's with that
Let's
team.
hope.
So,
God, we could really use it. So
right.
all hands on deck.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for suggesting this. I think this is a really lovely way for us to celebrate her birthday and, kind of commemorate her and her memory and to think about her in a new way. And wonder sort of like what it would have been like, based on not on nothing, but based on something. So yeah, really cool. This was fun.
Yes, it was.
And you barely cried. So good
I
job.
barely cried. All
I
right.
love it.
Thanks for watching, guys. Until the next time.
See ya.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Human Design Diaries. We hope that you love this episode as much as we did. Please take whatever resonates with you and leave the rest. If you're ready to dive deeper, visit our website at soulalignedsisters.com, where you'll find a wealth of free resources to support your journey. In our store, you can request a free human design chart, purchase low-cost reports, or even book a personalized reading with Jill. Be sure to explore our blog's Human Design Library, filled with stories and insights to help you get aligned. And don't miss our free Introduction to Human Design workshop, available through the Soul Aligned Sisters online school. Whether you're just starting out or deepening your knowledge, there's something there for everyone. Stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to uncover the magic of human design. Until next time, stay aligned and keep living your most magical life.